This is the first year that we have combined our Ben E. Keith and J.C. Penney lectureship into one lecture that speaks to all of our students. Part of the mission is to make sure that we work across those two lines, because hospitality talks about retail all the time, merchandising talks about having to do great customer service. So there needs to be a strong bridge, and this is an attempt to have us work better across lines, both students and faculty. We just finished with our board meetings this morning. Lots of exciting ideas coming out of those board meetings, and I want to remind students that after lunch, starting at, I think it's 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock are the round tables. And those will be located in the small ballroom around the corner. So grab some lunch somewhere, the students, and then come back. That is an opportunity for you to sit down at a round table with different advisory board members, and have them talk to you about their companies. So it's groups of 8 to 10 students per person, and then every 20 minutes you'll switch to a new table. So you'll get to have a chance to pick 3 different companies that you want to visit with. Following that, the board members will be doing what we call industry updates. And the industry updates is when they sit in a panel and they tell the faculty what they see changing in our industries, so that the faculty can keep our curriculum fresh and exciting and relevant for what's happening in the world. Students are welcome to attend that, but the intent is for it to be with faculty. Last year when we did this for the first time, many students stayed because they were just very interested with what the board members were saying. So without further ado, I want to introduce our keynote speaker today. Sarah Quinlan is someone that I met when I was director of the school at the University of Arizona. She was always the opening speaker of our big global retailing conference. She comes with a wealth of information and a wealth of experience. I'm not going to read her bio. You have that in front of you. But because she worked for MasterCard for several years as senior vice president, analyzing consumer data, she's very good at noticing the trends in the marketplace. So without further ado, I'm going to let Sarah tell her own stories, and please welcome Sarah Quinlan.
All right, success. I didn't trip coming up. That's always a good start. All right, first of all, for all you students in the back, you all get a failing grade, all right? One of the most important lessons I want you to understand about business, it is about being present. It is about actually always having yourself here. And sitting in the back, I can't see you. I can't feel you. I can't see your energy. So I want you to learn that first lesson to start with, all right? And by the way, women tend to sit in the back more than men. Shame on you, all right? So that even goes even further. All right, I had a crazy career, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my career after I talk about the economy a little bit. And the reason I want you to hear about my career is I want you to learn some of the things as you're starting out in your career that not to make you successful, but to make you have fun in it, to make you enjoy it, to make you have the passion. So I'm never accused of being a dead person, okay? I have a ridiculous and enormous amount of energy, right? I do wake up at 4 every morning and I get going, all right? But the real thing is I've always loved what I've done. And I've done multiple things, you'll hear. And I want you to really realize that life is long. Life is not short. Everyone talks about life is short, do the things you need to do. It's not. Life is really long, and there's so many opportunities to explore and do different things. And I want you to think about that as you're thinking about not the class you have or the exam you've got, later this week or anything like that, but thinking about what do I want to serve? Because I want you to live a purposeful life. I have always had a huge purpose in life, and my purpose in life was literally I want to solve global poverty. Because as an economist, I know that we actually don't have a lack of wealth problem. We don't have a lack of food problem in the world. We have a huge distribution problem. And it's a question of how we learn to do that. So that's been my purpose. So everything I've done in my career has led to how do we deal with this purpose. All right, so let me find the clicker. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the economy. Now, for those of you, I know you're not economics majors. I actually majored in politics, economics, rhetoric, and law at University of Chicago. Now, the great thing about University of Chicago, it is the school every year that's voted where fun goes to die. Okay? True story. We leave the library at 11:30 at night on a Saturday night. True story. And why? Well, it's because it's a nerd school. But I like to think of us as geeks with an attitude, all right? So we're geeks, but we actually are really thinking about it. It is the school, by the way, that's got the most Nobel Prizes ever, too. So I'm a little proud of that one. But the point to understand here is, what did it teach me to do? It taught me to think. But it also taught my love of economics, right? Now, economics is called the dismal science. Horrible, right? But what is it? It really helps you frame how you think about anything, right? Because if we don't have money to pay for anything, if we don't understand the way that it works through the system, if we don't understand how we can value things, we can't actually do what you're trying to do. If you're in merchandising, you have to figure out what I value, what I'm willing to buy. If you're in hospitality, you have to figure out, what am I willing to do in this hotel versus this hotel? What amenities matter? What do I value? That's all economics, right? But you also have to understand, for example, if we're going into an economic slowdown, should I presuppose and lower my rates to make certain I'm keeping 80% occupancy, or should I think about a 60% occupancy but at a higher rate? So you may be thinking I'm managing and going into hospitality management, or I'm doing these other things, but it really is all guided by economics. But I want you to do what I do. I am known as a macroeconomic person. That means I sit at 30,000 feet and I think about things at a big picture level, about what's going to happen 3 to 5 years out. And the value of that, and I think it's very important, is that you really get to think about how other people think about things. You bring in all those viewpoints, so you're making a more informed decision. And I think this is a very important thing, no matter what you choose in your career to be thinking about, is how do you actually bring that macro view in? So we're going to talk a little bit at 30,000 feet right now. All right, so, Well, those of you who are in retail, I'm very sorry to announce it is dead. Come on, who's heard this? Raise some hands. Who's heard this phrase? Absolutely. Well, I'm here to tell you it is far from dead. It is 70% of the United States economy is retail sales, folks. 7-0, okay? All right, we all talk about manufacturing all the time. You hear it in the news all the time because this is a big crisis, GM's on strike, et cetera. But the reality is, it's what everybody buys every day that is the most important thing that we actually are thinking about, right? And retail is far from dead. If you've looked at retail sales, they've been extremely healthy, right? And that's why. Because everything changed in 2008. So 2008 was equivalent to 1928. Now, none of you were alive in 1928. Perhaps your grandparents were. My mother was, all right? And their behavior permanently changed. If you know anybody from that generation who grew up in the Great Depression, they never learned to spend. My mother would never throw anything out. Oh my gosh, never, all right? We used to call her like the master of refixing everything, right? But that's what they learned. And by the way, it was only reinforced by World War II, right? But the point was, in the Great Depression, they learned that they didn't have anything, right? Well, we did the same thing, because the reason why the Great Depression mirrored, again, what happened in 2008 was it was the only time in history that there was, again, permanent wealth loss. What do I mean by that? In other recessions, things dip down, assets like houses, cars, other things dip down in price, but they come back eventually, right? Well, when you have a Great Recession or a depression, you have permanent loss of capital. So GM went bankrupt in the Great Recession we just had. That meant all the shareholders lost their money permanently. That doesn't come back. Our friends at Citibank, my friend was head of capital markets at Citibank, soon fired. That stock has never come back to its price that it was pre the recession. So that's permanent wealth loss for people. So the issue is, when you experience that, people change their behavior permanently. And I was fortunate to sit in the catbird seat at MasterCard and see 160 million transactions per hour. Think about that. And then I was even more spoiled because I had 2,000 data scientists behind me who helped me clean up that data and figure out exactly what you all do every day. So now, I don't know who you are. You're a 16-digit anonymous number to me. Your bank knows who you are, who issues you the credit card, all right, Capital One, et cetera. But in terms of MasterCard or Visa, they never know who you are. You're a number. But what you do and how you act, and how many of you went to Barnes & Noble and got a coffee today? How many of you actually went, here and took an Uber here today versus driving? How many of you stopped for gas? How many of you actually will not eat healthy going home and stop at fast food? We know this. And what happens is these trends change over time, and you can start to pick up the biggest trends and the changes. So retail didn't die. But how we spend and what we choose to spend on and our values permanently changed in 2008. And it was the first time we'd seen a shift, all right? So what was it? Well, prior to 2008, what did we buy? We bought stuff. We wanted more and more stuff. I need more shoes in my case, okay? I need more dresses, I need more houses, I need more cars, I need more boats, I need more everything, I need more. Well, that didn't get you very much, and it didn't matter how hard you worked at your job, you lost it anyway, you lost your house. There's still 11% of people in this country who are still underwater on their mortgage from 2008. Think about that. They can't move, right? Because they owe more on their house than it's actually worth. So the interesting thing of what happened is, the best thing that has ever happened in a recession, what do you think it is? Raise a hand. What do you think the best thing that came out of this in terms of our behavior? You like your family and friends again. You didn't like them before 2008. You bought stuff. But post the recession, you like them. So you spend time with them. So every bit of behavior changed, and what we see is people spending on services. 60% of spending is on services. We travel, we do things, we dine out, we do all this. It's all about the experience. That's why I titled my speech, The Experience Economy. Because we must understand that if we are not creating experiences in everything we do in our positions at work every single day, we are not going to be meeting the needs of the consumer. And that is what I want you to put in the form on. If there's one thing you take out of here, is how do I create an experience out of this? And not just leave it to the marketing team or the sales team. That's in product. Why has Apple been so successful? They create an experience people want. It's a very expensive experience, but it's still an experience people want. So that's an important thing. All right, so we've figured out that the death of retail is wrong. But what else is going on? Well, this is it. I want you to think about these things. Here comes the economics lecture, folks, all right? So don't go to sleep on me, all right? 3 things really matter. Employment, because again, before the recession, we all spent on OPM. What's OPM? Other people's money. Okay, you're all good at your parents, okay? They know this, all right? So, by the way, did you know that my generation is the first generation that likes its kids? What do you mean? What do I mean by that? Well, in my generation, you graduated from school, you came home, and your parents said to you, "So nice to see you. Where am I sending your stuff? And I will see you at Christmas." Right? That's what happened in my generation. In our generation, we're spending on you, right? Because we love you. So it's a big difference. That transference of wealth is happening now. It's a very important trend to pick up. All right, so employment matters. Sales type matters. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And then net migration. And all these things, you'll say, well, wow, I thought we were talking about merchandising and the economy and such. That matters. All right, employment. So who's a senior here? Y'all going to look for jobs? Exactly, right? Okay? Well, the good news is you're going to find one. And this is really important to recognize. This is the best labor environment we've had in 25 years. And there's a combination of two things going on. First and foremost, we absolutely are in a very solid, good economy right now. So please be careful of the headlines you're reading or watching on CNBC or whatever you're hearing. This is a solid economy. We are in positive GDP. We are making things. We are selling things. So we're actually in a very good space. And my nickname, I was just sharing before I came up in here, on Wall Street, is Duchess of Doom, all right? So if I'm telling you that I'm this positive, you gotta really believe me, because usually I'm terribly negative, all right? So the point to understand is we are still adding jobs to the economy. The second reason this is really, really important is my generation forgot to have children. And what I mean by that is we had 2.32 children per household as opposed to the 2.64 we needed to replace ourselves in this generation of baby boomers that's now retiring. So the other reason why you're going to find a job is we just don't have enough people, all right? So this is a really critical thing. This is why we actually do need a comprehensive immigration policy in this country. I don't care which side you come on that issue, but the issue is people have to be allowed to come into this country to work, and that includes H-1B visas, which are the highest level of visas for PhDs. My husband is literally a rocket scientist, all right, and he can't get enough visas for people coming in from India, China, and other people who want to come work here and work with him. These other PhD rocket scientists, and we're not producing enough here for him to really continue to do the work he's trying to do, right? These things are really important. So we need it at the highest level, we need it at the middle level, and the lowest level, because again, we didn't have any kids. Now, the good news, again, it means you can find a job. So there should be no excuses at the end of this coming graduation period when you don't have jobs, because that means you just didn't spread your net wide enough. But in all honesty, in reality, there is absolutely a very tight job market, all right? I work in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a real estate developer there. And I've actually had to start my own construction company because I can't find enough labor working to make certain I can finish what's called a punch list. So you build a building, right? And then you go into that last part where you're just checking all the things that still need to be fixed, right? It's called a punch list. You can't get the subcontractors to come back because they've gone to the next job. Like, this is how tight labor is. It's a really important thing. So this is the good news, right? And everyone was like, well, we only ended 130,000 jobs, 136,000 jobs. I'm like, please, get over yourself. We're adding jobs. This is the good news. The key is, are we adding the right jobs? All right, here's Texas. Even better, right? Now, I don't want you to stay here necessarily unless you want to, all right? But again, it's a heck of a good economy down here, and it will continue to be so. And I think that this is the important thing to recognize. Now, the rest of the world looks horrible, all right? I'll just be really direct on that, all right? So China is slowing far faster than the statistics come out and say, and it's really interesting. I have some interesting data sources I get out of China. I, for example, have a number of friends who are Chinese ship owners and ship builders and the like, so I can actually see what's on their ships going in and out and like. So they are slowing significantly faster. Now, they have the resources to continue to stimulate their economy, which they will do. They will build, cities to nowhere and bridges to nowhere, and it's a full employment policy, and that will go fine. But the reality is they are on a significantly weaker footing than they've ever been. And it's extremely hard to move a 1.4 billion population and continue to upstream. The average income in China is still only $6,000 per year, right? So you all think about all the time that they want to buy, and we hear they're going to buy, but only 110 million actually have a passport to leave China. So it's a very sort of two-tiered economy, but it is slowing. But the problem is when China catches the flu, so does all of Asia, down to Australia. 40% of Australia's GDP is dependent upon exporting iron ore to China. So if China isn't going to build steel to build the buildings to nowhere, then Australia, and Australia's not diversified as an economy like we are, right? And so that's a real problem. And so you can actually see that we can see that slowdown all of a sudden happening in Korea, in Japan, and the like, right? And then you look over at Europe. Well, Europe didn't do what we did. So in 2008, we had just massive pain, as you know, around here. Everyone got fired. It was horrible. Regulation came in. It was, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't fun, all right? Alcohol sales went up. Not surprising. All right. But it was, tough. But what we did is we did the hard things we had to do because we have flexibility in our economy. Europe does not. So I used to run my hedge fund in Geneva. I employed 53 people. Not one of those people, I actually had to get permission from the state of Geneva if I wanted to lay someone off. Right? I actually... on maternity leave is very frustrating there. It actually works against women because the reality is they come back to the exact same position with the exact same responsibilities. So while they're out, and they can be out a year, you have to either, everyone does double duty, so everyone hates that person, or you hire somebody and you have redundant staff. So it works against women. So women of childbirth age are not hired in Geneva for that very reason. So it's not actually a progressive childbirth policy. So that's the problem, is the inflexibility of the labor laws and not changing them post. You know how they say, never let a good recession go to waste. Post the recession, they didn't change the rules. So the problem is Europe is sitting in a quandary right now because they have higher labor costs and real challenges and not real easy ways to do business. There's massive intellectual property created in France that is never monetized because of the challenge of starting a business there. And the access to capital is not there. So Europe's in a problem. Anybody heard of Brexit? Talk about not voting. Shame on the young people, because they all said, well, I would have voted to stay if I had known it was that important. It's that important. All right, so the reality is that's going to be, that comes up at the end of this month. Let me tell you, this is a cluster mess like I have never seen in my life, all right? And it's going to make the Great Recession look really, really, really easy, all right, on a relative basis, because this is just... Like literally right now, you don't need a passport. You just go in and out. So think about now, you even have to just physically set up passport barriers. Just the physical stuff that has to be done, not even the logistics of trade. Think about negotiating a trade agreement with 27 countries instead of one. All right? We can't even get one done. All right? So understand, this is a real mess. So that doesn't sound real good. And Africa has been supported by China, but I just told you China's slowing. So the good news is we don't need anybody else. I hate to tell you that. All right? So because we don't live via exports, which is only 12% of the economy, we actually are our own ecosystem. What we need to do is not get in our own way. All right, more on that coming up. This is the good news for those of you getting hired. Wages have finally gone up. All right. This took forever, but they haven't gone up enough. All right? I was asked last night about the $15 minimum wage. We absolutely need the $15 minimum wage. And I did the research on this. In the 15 states and cities, I pulled the data of what happened post a mandated $15 minimum wage. And you know what happened? Not one person was laid off in any of those cities due to wages going up. And more importantly, 70% of that increased wage immediately came into the economy and spending. This even happened at Walmart. I pulled it directly, and Walmart directly benefited because the Walmart employees spent at the Walmart that they worked at. So the interesting thing to understand is why. Because we know that 40% of Americans don't even have $400 in the bank and live paycheck to paycheck. So raising minimum wage allows that money to come right into the economy. And what do I want? I want velocity of money. The faster money goes through the economy, the better the economy is. Right? So the key that I really want to be thinking about is how do we, accelerate that? Well, raising the wages matters. But it also matters going back to what I was talking about, that we didn't have children. Because it's very expensive. Ask any employer sitting here in this room or anyone who's ever employed people. It's very expensive to go find people and hire them. It's very expensive to train people. It's expensive to retain them. So the fact is, if you have to do it again because you're having a massive turnover in your staff, and now I appreciate that wages aren't the only reason that people stay. But in a tight economy, it's one of the things that you have to be equivalent with your competitors on to at least start the level playing field of the benefits that people want in their employment to actually keep them. So this is a very important thing. We need to see wages continue to rise here. And I won't even get into the fact that CEOs make 256 times on average more than their average employee, okay? And I'm a capitalist. If you haven't Googled University of Chicago and the economics department, it is the home of capitalism, all right? So I'm all about capitalism. But the reality here is this is not sustainable. For this, there to be this much income inequality with respect to this. And do I really think that a CEO deserves that much more? Yes, they deserve more. They are taking more responsibility, more legal responsibility as well. But to that level, it doesn't actually make an economic sense to me. So I'm against it, all right? So retail sales. I told you they're 70% of GDP. But think about this. So this is what I want you to understand. So who's in hospitality here? Who's going into hospitality? All right, good, good. Well, the interesting thing to recognize about this, it's not about getting me into the hotel, that rack rate, right? It's about what else am I going to spend while I'm there, right? So I was over at the Embassy Suites, and you've got to go into this hotel. This is the coolest new hotel I've been in a long time. Very, very cool. But how smart is it for them to have the coffee place right there? I don't even have to walk across the hall. I literally can check in, turn left, buy a bottle of water for my room, you know, buy the, you know, boom. Think about if everybody who checks in there immediately is spending an additional $5 to $15 to $20, right? What does that add up to? It adds up to a lot. The margins on that are significantly better than the margins on the room. So this is the point to understand is how do we think about ancillary services? And really understanding what it actually is going to be working. Because the interesting thing is this sense of the service economy is what we really do really well in this country. And I want you to really pull on that thought and think about what else can I be adding? How else, when I'm thinking about a design of a hotel, how does it work so more and more services can be involved there, right? And that's the value, by the way, if you think about a hotel, even if you don't valet park anymore, it's the value of having someone standing out there, just directing people where to go, this and that. Because why? That person can be talking about services, the restaurants in the hotel, this and that. Everything that then adds more and more and more, you know, to keeping people in that space longer, spending more, right? All right. So here's e-commerce. Look at that number. How many of you truly thought that Amazon's taking over the world? Raise your hand if you really have heard this, right? Okay, so the reality is Amazon's very impressive, right? Jeff Bezos, very smart man, richest man in the world. But let's be clear, they make the majority of their money renting out the web through AWS. If you look at their balance sheet, they don't make it selling you something in their store. They really don't. Look at their balance sheet, it's just numbers, all right? But what they've done is created an easy way for you to buy commodity products, right? The easy stuff. Diapers.com was brilliant, right? Who wants to schlep a big box of diapers? You already got a kid under one arm, right? So, like, it's a pain, right? Have it delivered to the door, right? So what they've become really good at is delivering things that are simple, straightforward, that we aren't going to send back. Because the biggest reason we hate online is the returns. So here's the second big change in behavior post the recession. So first, we like each other. Check. Good. Second big change, two people in a family are working, and their most valuable thing to them is actually not their children or their dog, but time. Time is the most valuable thing that none of us have enough of. So everyone goes, and that's why everybody thought that online would sell. But online actually takes more time, right? Because if it's not the right item, and you have to return it, and you have to repack it up, you may have to drop it off, and porch pirates are a problem, all these types of things. There's a real challenge in online that it doesn't meet the specifications. I don't know who's ever tried food online in terms of groceries, all right? But the person who picks my tomatoes does not know that I like them firm and they come soggy, right? Like all these types of things matter to people. So the interesting thing of what actually works, all right, is again, it's going to be great for commodities, and it's growing. It's been growing at double digits, but it's 10.2% of sales. Again, the other reason is, again, because I like my daughter. I have a 28-year-old who works for Google in New York, and I don't live there, so I go see her, and she is very intelligent only for one reason, because she knows that I will take her shopping on my credit card, right? All right, so the reality is, but it's a social experience, and we like to do it together. It's spending time together. That's the point of the physical source. Caitlin could go and buy anything online that she wanted, but again, she doesn't have the time, in all honesty, to go, repackage things up and send them back. So for the most part, she doesn't shop online. So it's not a generational thing either. And that was the thing that we found in the MasterCard data, is I shop the same way online that all of you students do. And that's the interesting thing. You may be a little bit more digitally literate than my generation, but we actually buy about the same things online as other people. So it's a real difference. I'm not saying it's not going to grow, but I truly believe in all my research that we're at max going to get to 30% online. And I think that's going to be where it's going to cap out, right? And it's going to take us a long time to get there. I really believe this. Again, it's about the experience, and I think this is what we're going to continue to see. All right. So let's talk about the evolution of retail. All right, so we started with strip centers, right? And they still exist, right? And you see them all the time. But the most successful strip centers now have music, they have benches, things like that, because again, you're trying to get people to stay a bit longer, right? Have a bit more of that type of experience being there. Then we went to these huge malls, right? All right, and you've got them down here and such. But they were all anchored by a department store. Why are department stores doing so badly? What do you think? You know why department stores are doing badly? Because we actually don't buy clothes anymore. We're actually sort of naked. And what I mean by that is even those of us who go to work don't have to dress up anymore. So this perspective of we don't need a work wardrobe and a weekend wardrobe, so we don't buy as much clothes as an overall component of what we buy. And so what happens is that look at the department stores, they morphed away from being department stores and really being, I sell everything. I sell home goods, this, that, and everything, into really being clothing stores that all sold the same thing, right? Whether you were luxury, meaning Neiman Marcus and Saks, or you were lower end, meaning Penny's or Macy's. And now what they've done to successfully start to reinvent themselves is they've started to reinvent the home. And they're starting to recognize that we all are together, and it starts with that. And there's much more sense of more casual clothes. I call it the yoga pants everyday look, okay? Which, by the way, ladies, not a great look, okay? Just my personal opinion, all right? There's a time and place. But the point that's interesting about this is we've watched the department stores have to really respond to the fact that we just don't want to replace our wardrobe every single season. It used to be, oh, good, spring's out here. Great, fall's out here. Great, summer's here. No, that's not what we value anymore. And this is what I want you to really think about again. What services are we going to pay for? And then you think about the clothing as actually then supporting the service. So yes, we are going to yoga studios occasionally, or we just like to wear them, right? But the point is that then you can actually understand that it's about the experience of being comfortable on an airplane, all right? Rather than it's about I'm going to work out and I'm buying yoga pants that are going to get replaced at a certain time frame. So I want you to reverse how you're thinking about the physical good, because it's to support the service. And that's the big difference of how I want you to think about it. All right. The final thing that I want you to start to think about in terms of retail is showrooming. All right? And this, I think, for all of you who are in merchandising, all right, there's nothing more critical than this. This is what is actually going to create the experience on an ongoing basis that people want to see, right? In other words, saying, how do I actually succeed in getting people to want a product, and it's to touch and try. So everybody thought when Amazon came out, I just told you they sell commodities, that they would put Best Buy out of business, right? Because a TV is a TV, a TV. But a TV is actually not a TV. There's different features that people want to see, and people want to test them, and people want to try them. They've also become so advanced that, to be perfectly honest, I'm screaming at my cable box at home half the time when I can't hook it up. And thank God I'm married to a rocket scientist who can. But the reality is you sit there and you really recognize that they learned that their stores were not really for people buying anything there. They were for showrooming what we could be buying. So what they've actually, if you look at their sales model, many people actually go in, test all the TVs, and then actually buy it online to be delivered. Because who wants to schlep a 70-inch TV in the back of your little, hatchback? It doesn't work, right? So this is the interesting thing that we've watched, is they were able to successfully compete against a much bigger competitor because they were able to actually say, I can use the showrooming to introduce the service. And then, of course, they added the Geek Squad, which is the service component that I was talking about, right? And between the two, they made it a real unique retail experience that worked for them. And this is what really works. And this is what hotels can do. When hotels are thinking about a new concept, they can actually say and take a floor of the hotel that they're in and switch it into the new concept and see if people like it, right? That's a version of showrooming as well. The key is to understand, test the experience out, see if people want it, see if people like it, and then you can go from there. But it's an extremely important way. So the interesting thing, what is the implication for my business in real estate? It means people want significantly shorter leases rather than the typical 7-year term that I used to sign them to, right? But if you're sitting here and you're a stadium, for example, it's a question of, well, I don't necessarily want someone in there because maybe people don't like that food for 7 years in a row. So I've got to think about, from my perspective, it might be better that I actually have a shorter lease with someone. So there's real implications on all sides of business here to what we're thinking. And what it actually means is I actually am building a lot of buildings now with flexible walls that actually can be expanded and moved out, because then I can understand the concept and move things and keep that building relevant without having to tear it down and build a brand new building, right? And that's a real difference in how people are thinking about this. All right. But what for the last 3 years in the data was the #1 gift for holiday? Not gift cards. Trips is the exact answer. It was. We all gave a trip with our family. This is the #1 thing. So that sweater that you got shortchanged. All right? So the reality is we all want to travel with each other. This is it. It's about the experience. So again, it's going to create even more challenges for traditional retail. But what happens? Well, this is the key thing where the city or the town has to start advertising, because what we know, when people go on vacation in the data, they take 1 full day to go shopping because they don't have time in the rest of their lives to do it. So this is what they do when they're on, it's retail therapy on vacation. Right? And so this is the interesting thing. So making certain wherever you're going, you know where the retail district is, what are the unique offerings, what's special about this. All these are the type of strategies that can be employed that makes it so much more successful, because you know that we're traveling. All right? Now, the interesting thing that really benefits, again, the US is only 40% of Americans have a passport. So you can't leave the island. All right? So understanding this means we travel within the U.S. This is why it's been so, you've seen every town now have a visit Raleigh, visit Dallas, visit Boston. Everybody's, because again, it's become competitive to figure out what people can do. And it's all about getting people to spend more in the experience, but knowing that this is what the experiences are driving. All right? And these are the kind of things that are so different that we see in the data from before. It's all vacation, right? That's all you think about, all right? You might like the beach, you might like the mountains, you might like Disneyland. That's my vacation, right? All right, so who's the beneficiary of all this stuff? Lodging, #1 thing. Now, everyone thought Airbnb was going to disrupt everything. The interesting thing about the data is actually the majority of the country, in fact, over 75% have never actually even looked at the Airbnb website. So everybody assumes everyone stays in an Airbnb. Don't make that assumption. regular hotel chains are more than here to stay, right? And it's not just old folks like me, all right? It's just a lot of people don't want to stay in someone else's bed. Now, in a hotel, you're staying in someone else's bed. So it's an absolutely illogical, uneconomic, unrational decision, but it doesn't matter. We make it anyway. So the reality here to think about is, okay, so the benefit of lodging, but what type of lodging? Well, one of the third big change post the recession is it's no longer chic to be chic. And what do I mean by that? It's that we aren't actually very flashy in our wealth anymore. We don't really show it off. We dress down, we aren't, and we've seen this in a lot of the luxury brands have really had a real challenge keeping up with this because again, I'm not talking about the Kardashians, okay? But with exception of the Kardashians, all right? The rest of us aren't actually, showing off the new design and looking at the new latest Chanel shoes, et cetera, et cetera. But the interesting thing is, the other thing we see in the data is the rich are rich because they don't spend. It's very important to recognize they save, all right, because they're rich, all right? But the reality is, so when everybody sort of gears up their brands to be going way up high, it's a real challenge, and it doesn't make sense. You want to be going for the masses. Trust me. They spend all the time. And that's where you really can get that volume going up here. Doesn't mean you have to cheapen your brand down to being I'm the cheapest. No, because everybody wants value for money. The other thing we saw, and you saw the second beneficiary, is restaurants, right? Well, the interesting thing, all right, in restaurants is we've really decided that we will never cook again. And what do I mean by this is we are now up to 48.7% of our food spend is in restaurants versus grocery stores. So that's a real challenge for Kroger, right, or Publix, or whoever the big chain around here is, for grocery stores. It's huge, right? Safeway, et cetera, right? But the real thing is, it again goes back to that time thing I was talking about. By the way, millennials, 52% restaurant, 48 grocery. What do I think Generation Z will be? Not even using a microwave, right? So it's really, it's going to be very interesting to sort of see this evolution, right? So this is the big thing to understand. These trends carry through here in terms of, again, the time and how we think about what we're doing with our time, how we're valuing. What do we want to spend? It's a value for money economy. What do we actually want to spend our money on, right? And then third is travel providers, right? So you've seen the interesting thing about the airline industry that many people don't realize that Wall Street loves to laugh at is the airline industry is the only industry in the history of America, if you add up all their performance together, that has not made money because they've gone bankrupt so many times, right? So it's amusing, but I think they actually maybe have got it this time. That's because they're charging you for everything, okay? Like you can't breathe in this aisle, all right? You're only allowed to breathe alternatively minutes in this aisle. Come on, we're getting there soon. I can really believe it. There was somebody who actually said, one of the airlines, I was at a strategy meeting with them, and they said, well, what if we had people standing up? I don't think that's the customer experience you want, right? So it's like, but it's interesting, right? They're just thinking about it. But we know that these are the three beneficiaries of the big trend. Again, a permanent trend, not going away. So it's really understanding how do we think about movement? How do we think about it? And we think about our world being bigger than just the town we're in anymore. And this is the key thing to really recognize that is very important. And this is especially important if you're in a smaller business with a smaller brand, because this is where the uniqueness of that brand needs to show so that you can bring awareness to it. This is digital marketing at its best of how do you reach people in another community so that they actually can come in and understand, all right? I don't know if you know, but Visit California, they have a $60 million advertising budget each year. It's big for a state, right? And just understand, but it's paid off. Visit Florida is $40 million, right? So, two big places. But what is that paid off for Florida? When people go and visit a town, if they like it, they think about moving there and living there and working there. I already told you how desperate everybody is for labor, all right? So there's 1,000 people a day moving to Florida, 75 a day to Raleigh, and over 1,200 moving to Texas. So understanding that this sense of where people are is really, really critical here, right? So that leads me to my net migration. The world is not equal even within the U.S. I already told you the world's not equal, right? And we know that that's the case, right? But the interesting thing is really within the U.S., we have become a country that does very different things. And we only go where the jobs are now. So I want you to think about the country a little way. So look at the map with me, okay? So I grew up in Boston. You can hiss and boo. I love my Patriots. I grew up in Boston. Boston is the home of two things: medical technology, all right? And it's also the home of asset management. So Fidelity, who you've heard of, is located there, also State Street. Two big, huge companies that manage a lot of money, all right? So that's what they do. You go down to New York. You have two things going on in New York. You have Wall Street, where I used to work, which actually employs 350,000 less people now due to machines. You know, we talk about automation and things like that. All my friends who are traders lost their jobs. I actually use a computer now instead of them. They're very nice people, but paying them $600,000 a year, that computer costs me about $50. So it's not quite the same thing. So that, and the second business is, did you know that Google employs 13,000 people in New York? Facebook has 10,000 in New York. So it's digital advertising. That's the headquarters of what's going on in New York. So Madison Avenue, Mad Men. Can you imagine what John Hamm would think what Mad Men has actually become in 2019? It's become my daughter selling you digital ads on Facebook. Okay, so then you go down to Washington. Well, Washington is government. There's nothing more to say. All right, and then you come down to the Southeast. Now, the Southeast is frankly, and that includes Texas, okay? I'm including you in this, all right? This is the coolest area of the country because this is the area where we have final end manufacturing, all right, because it's labor that's not unionized labor down here, right? So we do that last end manufacturing here, and we also, frankly, it's where retirees want to live, all right? So there's a fair amount of money and the services off of that. There's health care, all right, which is another big thing that's going on. But basically, it's the cheapest labor in the country. So it actually has attracted a ton of people down there. All right, you move over to Arizona. With all due respect, Arizona is where dead people are. So this is where retirees are. It's interesting. So it's actually literally the age is going up there. The average age in Florida is now 43, right? So it's a big difference. Then you go up to LA. LA is what? LA is content for the internet, all right? You go all the way up to Seattle. It's the backbone of the internet. You move across the country, all right, to the upper Midwest there. That's shale and fracking. That's our oil. By the way, you know we're the largest oil producer in the world now. Thank you very much. That's a very important thing to the economy. All right? And then you come to the Midwest. And I honestly don't know what the Midwest is going to be when they grow up. They're high-cost labor, all right, with the exception of the city of Chicago itself or the city of Minneapolis itself. But outside of that, in real problem. Real problem. The family farm's in real problem. There's real challenges there. They don't manufacture as much up there anymore because they cost a lot to manufacture up there, right? So I am most worried in this country about the Midwest. So when you're thinking about your job prospects, those of you who are seniors, really think about these issues, right? Because you want to be in an area that's growing, expanding, and will continue to be in that ecosystem, right? Because that's what's going on there, right? Which is very important. But who's going to win? All right, going forward. Well, small business is going to continue to win. What we create best and what makes the United States succeed and why we win versus the rest of the world and why everybody thought that China was going to beat us and we were going to fall right behind. And I'm not saying they haven't done some amazing things in a very short period of time. But the reason that we win is we create intellectual property here. And everybody knows that, all right? And that's what we do. So I want you to continue to invent. That's what we do. All right, and that's what we do best. And that is the highest value economic chain that we can then sell to others and distribute to others. And that's what we continue to do. And that's what small businesses do. And 70% of Americans work for small businesses with 50 people or less. So it becomes that driver. Bricks and mortar, really going to still be there. That relationship is still there. We all have, commuting, all the stuff that we have. I hate all that stuff, right? And I hate all that stuff because I can't sense someone's energy unless I'm in the room with them. all right? And that's why we all still fly to business meetings, all right? It's a nice thought that we were going to do everything over the computer and all that and stuff. But I can tell you, half the time when I'm on a conference call with my colleagues, around the world, you can hear who's actually like looking at their Instagram. All right, you can hear it, right? It's difference in their energy and their voice, right? So the point that matters is that's going to matter, and showrooming's going to work. All right. So there's a couple things, and then I'm going to switch to my career real quick, and then we'll do Q&A. Growth isn't linear. So I've given you a pretty rosy picture here, right? But there's a real problem going on here, and I'm going to get political for a second but I don't consider it political. I consider it economic. I want every one of you, when you're done here, to go send an email to your congressperson or your senator or both and tell them to do something about the tariffs. Because the only reason the U.S. economy will go into recession in the next year so that you don't find a job, because I won't hire you, is because of the tariffs. There's nothing else to slow us down. We really are doing that well. And this is the one fundamental issue that dribbles down into the entire economy that will slow retail spending. And I told you the importance of retail spending to the economy. And so it's not an issue. I don't care. That's the most interesting thing. There's not an economist in the world that agrees with the strategy that's going on tariffs right now. Not one. All right? Because the reality is we know who pays the tariffs, and that's you. Right? Because Walmart's going to give it to you. Walmart and Target are ready for Christmas. They pre-bought knowing this was coming. So you're okay for Christmas this year, but I would suggest you buy 6 times what you need, because by the time you get to next Christmas, if these tariffs continue, it'll be double the price. And that's the real reality of when that hurts. And then that starts to get into people's consciousness that it's too expensive to do things, then they stop spending, then businesses stop investing. Do you see the snowball that starts to happen? And so this is the real risk that is going on in the economy right now. So the issue, and then everyone goes, okay, well, how do you stop China from stealing our intellectual property? It's very simple. You rejoin the TPP, all right? And for those of you who don't know, this is a trade agreement that was set up where everybody was in it in Asia, down to Australia, except China. So then we're all negotiating against China. First issue on the table, stop stealing our intellectual property. If you want to trade with us. They need to trade with us, folks, okay? It's not an option that they can't trade. They're not their own ecosystem, right? So the issue, all right, that we know is that we don't have to manufacture in China. We can manufacture in Vietnam. We can manufacture in Cambodia. We can manufacture in Laos in terms of clothing or things like that. So, and everybody's already moving their supply chains. It's not easy to do, but you can move them. So the interesting thing is, we will see, but this is the biggest worry I've got, right? And that's why growth will not be linear, and you'll see this volatility. Remember, the stock market's not the economy, though. Only 50% of Americans have money in the stock market. So don't watch the stock market for the economy. Watch the economy, all right? I want you to continue to create, and then finally, you have to go shopping. All right, so this is the important thing. Now I'm just going to close with a few minutes, and then I'll take Q&A. I want to talk a little bit about my career. Okay, so I came out of Boston, I told you, and I was very fortunate, and this is what I want you to look for in your life. I want you to look for a sponsor. Everybody always talks about getting a mentor. With all due respect to someone who's advising you, that's very kind, but that will do nothing for you in life. A sponsor, and what's the difference? A mentor gives you good counsel, gives you some ideas, might give you some advice in a sticky situation. A sponsor grabs you by the hand and pulls you where you need to be. And that's a big difference in life. Having someone who literally will sit out there and say, this is the person that I want on my team. This is the person that's ready for the next assignment. This person, that's what the difference in life. If you look at some very successful people, including myself, I wouldn't say I'm successful, but you know what I'm saying? I had sponsors along the way. And this was critical because I had a sponsor. I was in public school. I was doing extremely well, but I started hanging with a bad crowd because I was bored. And I had a sponsor in life, because my family couldn't have paid for private school, who went to my mom and said, that girl deserves to be in private school because she will be challenged and she will do great things, but she's not going to if she's hanging with this crowd. So that was my first sponsor in life. So I went to this private school 36 in my graduating class. How distressing. There was no place to hide in high school and like not, do your homework. How upsetting, right? I felt I'd been punished. But what it did is it got me into great schools and finally the University of Chicago. Then from there, I was able to get some sponsors within the school. I was president of student government, and I got sponsors of the dean because at that point, they didn't allow people to go directly into MBA programs. But I got a sponsor who said, this woman's been running a food business on the streets of Boston. So before food trucks existed, I ran a food business, all right? And said she's ready to go to business school to get those final things she needs, all right, to go. And so I was sponsored by the dean, and I got in, and I went to business school. So then I go and I start on Wall Street. 6 women and 600 guys. And this was in the 80s. And let me be very clear, every bit, if you've ever heard of the book Liar's Poker, that was my life, because I was on that trading desk, and I just begged not to be in that book, because I lived every part of that book. And it's a disaster, all right? It's not easy. So what happened? I had a sponsor. And the sponsor helped me really have the courage to handle when I was getting sexually harassed and when I was not getting opportunities and figuring out things. I was outselling and out-trading the guy next to me. We had trade tickets at that point, so you could actually physically measure the pile. I was 3-1. But what happened is, it came to bonus time. We were salary bonus at that point. We weren't commissioned. And they came to me and they said, well, here's your bonus for the year. I think you should be really pleased. It's the best a woman's ever done here. And I said, yes. But you underpaid me. And I did this and this and this. And I also know that so-and-so, who has 3 children, got this. So you have until Monday morning to correct this, or I'll go to the Wall Street Journal. Now, in the 80s, no one did this. Trust me, you didn't do this. But I also knew and had confidence in my abilities, which is the next thing I really want you to think about. I want you to be confident in what you know. Be confident in what you do. Challenge yourself. Say, I can do this. I know I can do this. Throw those shoulders back. Breathe. All right? All those type of things, because it matters. That confidence to go in there. You can have some internal, butterflies, but have the confidence to know and, really speak to your own truth on what you deserve. So I did get the pay raise, by the way, that I expected, right? And so then I went and I started managing money. And I managed long-only money. Now, here's the other part I want you to recognize in your career that I think is very important, is to be kind and to really pay it forward. And think about people who don't have the same opportunity you do. Think about people who don't have the opportunity to go to college. So I was managing the pension fund for all the workers in Las Vegas. I don't know if you know, but it's actually a unionized. Everyone who serves you a cocktail out there at a restaurant, they're all unionized, right? So on the board of trustees, it's a Taft-Hartley government plan. There's 3 members from the union and 3 members from business who govern that plan. So I used to go out a day early to spend time with the president of the union. Now, Hattie McDonald was an African-American woman around 60 years old who had had 10 children and risen to be president of the union as a maid at Caesars. All right, so she had been impressive, her whole thing. But she didn't know, she never finished high school, did not know anything about stocks and bonds. So I'd fly out a day early to sit down and have dinner with Hattie and talk to her about what she was going to vote on the next day, so she would really understand. And really, and I didn't do it with anything like I'm going to get something from this. I just wanted her to know, because I thought it was an insult for her to just have to go along and vote just because she was president of the union. It was it just seemed insulting to me. All right, so one day we're having these dinners, and we did this every quarter. And by the way, I detest Vegas, okay? I gambled every day and got a report card every day as a portfolio manager on Wall Street. I don't need to gamble my money and lose it, right? House always wins, by the way, just so you know. But the interesting thing, she turns to me, she goes, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I really want to start my own hedge fund. And she goes, well, why? I said, because there's a lot of companies I hate, and I just want to short them and make a lot of money. She goes, well, should we be doing that? I said, well, yeah, you should. I said, because the stock market goes up, but it also goes down. And she goes, well, that's interesting. She says, well, how much is it going to take for you to do that? And I said, 50 million. She goes, done. We'll vote at the next meeting. You better get that thing set up. All right? And that's what she did. There's a sponsor, folks. But what would it come from? It came from my paying it forward. So I want you to really think about, we all have busy lives. We have crazy opportunities and everything we have to do every day. But paying it forward and spending that time, I mean, I didn't want anything from it. It was very kind. It was incredible. I would not have been able to do this. There's, to this day, by the way, only 3% of the money managed in the world is managed by women. It's shameful. And we actually outperform guys in performance by 2.97%. Why? We sell our losers faster. Think about that. We know we're wrong, boom, move on. Men, due respect. I know you got to be right. So the interesting thing, so what did I do after that? So I ran this hedge fund. I also picked up and moved it to Michigan. Why did I do that? I saw opportunity. So that's the next thing I want you to think about. Be bold. Think about different opportunities, places to go, try different things. Why? I knew I had an edge on the auto industry, but I figured if I got close to it, I'd have even a better edge than my friends in New York who all got caught in the same sort of group speak, right? So I got there, and by the way, became the top performing, in the top 10 performing hedge funds in the country because I had such an edge off of it. It was kind of sad to sell negatively against people that were my friends, but that's life. But suffice to say, that was a real opportunity. So what did I do next? Well, I actually built and sold a computer company. Knew nothing about it, but what the heck, it looked really interesting, and found the right people, found the capital, and did it. Why? This is the point. Surround yourself with people much smarter than you. Much smarter than you. I always do. I still do it today. It's the greatest thing. It stimulates my mind every day, and it makes me want to learn more. So that's I did that. And then I turned to my daughter. My daughter was 9 at the time. And I said, we're moving to Geneva. She goes, where's Geneva, Mommy? And I said, that's why we're moving. You're a stupid American. And so I picked her up, and we moved to Geneva. I did not speak French. I did not speak German. I did not speak Romansh or Italian, the 4 legal languages of Switzerland. But we moved anyway. I got fired by my daughter in 6 months for being a stay-at-home parent. Sorry. See, I fail, all right? I am not good at that, all right? I'm bad at that. I admit that, all right? I am thankful for all the people that have helped me co-parent my daughter over the course of my life, right? She basically was, Mom, you're driving me crazy, like this, go back to work. And I started managing money. And I was managing money in the Middle East. And what happened? Well, it was interesting. I was able, I don't know, who's heard of Bernie Madoff here in the room? Biggest Ponzi scheme in the world ever, right? Well, we all knew, and this is something that you always have to think about. Ethics matter, all right? Now, I happen to be the daughter of an ethics professor, but suffice to say, ethics matter. And Wall Street knew for years that this guy was a crook, all right? It was just a very well-known secret that there was no such thing as split strike conversion, which was what his strategy was, all right? And so, but, everybody was making a lot of money off of him, so nobody really blew the whistle. So I'm down in Cairo with my client, and he says to me, Sada, I'd give you more money, but I can't because I have this guy, he makes me money every single month, and you don't. No, you don't make money every month in the markets. You can, hopefully over the long term you do, but you don't. So I said, oh, you've got that crook Bernie Madoff in your portfolio. He goes, say what? and I said, if I prove to you that he's a crook, will you give me the money plus 10% to manage for you? He goes, I will do that. I did 3 things, by the way. I tried to meet with Bernie. Bernie would never meet with an institutional portfolio manager like myself. All right, that's check 1, meaning cross 1, right? You of course, any money manager will meet with another money manager, all right, to learn, share ideas, thoughtfulness, what do you think about the markets? It's just standard procedure. Secondly, this is where I want you always to learn another lesson. Always be skeptical. Always be questioning. All right? I have always had Deloitte as my accounting firm, right? A major firm, well-known. Well, everybody can say, I know her books are done according to things, clean, right? He had literally a storefront on Long Island with 2 guys in it accounting for $65 billion in assets. Come on, guys, right? Raise a question, right? I drove to Long Island, knocked on the door. Like, you're the accountant for Bernie Madoff, right? Then the third thing was he had feeder funds coming in. So money was coming in from other people that were raising money for him. And I had them send me some trade. They offered to send me some trade tickets to explain this split strike conversion, right? And they didn't match the volumes in the markets that day. So I knew they were falsified. Strike three. So what happened is, after that, everybody knew that I had got it, and the whole Middle East started pulling out of the fund, right? Because they all talk to each other, right? This is the fourth lesson. Understand, business people all network and talk to each other. So nothing stays a secret, right? So finally, I get called up one day by someone. He said, Sarah, I'd like you to manage just my family wealth and nobody else's. And I'm like, no, thank you. Don't want that risk of only one person. You might all of a sudden wake up in the morning and say you don't like me. This person had never had anyone say no to them in their lives. The man was worth billions, right? No one ever said no to a billionaire, right? And I go on my merry way. I'm still enjoying living in Geneva. I'm skiing in the Alps. I'm having fun. I'm enjoying managing the clients I've got and everything. And he comes back and he goes, Sarah, what do you want? Negotiation 101. Now it was on my side. So I negotiated a deal I wanted. And then I took it and I set up the company in Geneva and managed the wealth for him, and which I did until 2010. At that point, I was burnt out, all right? Because one of the things of when you manage for a family is they get to make all the rules, right? Now, I had my own big plane, I had everything, but at some point, there's a price for everything, right? That's something you'll also have to decide in your careers and you'll learn. So I decided to come back to the US and I was like, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up? Notice how I'm morphing. I keep changing, I keep building, keep doing different experiences. Keeps life fresh, keeps things fun. So I had a friend, networking again, who was at MasterCard, and she said, Sarah, you got to come in and become our head of market insights. It's basically the chief economist. You got to come in and do this because we need to guide people with this data. We have this data, but people don't know how to use it. By the way, if any of you go into that side of the business, it's the hottest area of merchandising, of hoteling. It's figuring out who's going to be there, when they're going to be there, and interpreting what they're doing and projecting it. Big, huge career for you there. So that's what I did. So I literally traveled the world, 700,000 miles a year, 300 days a year. Don't recommend it. All right. I loved what I did in terms of the work, but being on a plane every day, not so much fun. But the point was I got to advise people and help them think about the world bigger. So I worked with, the finance minister of Japan to hold back a sales tax increase so the economy would keep growing. For an economy that has been in deflation and recession basically for 26 years, this is a really important thing. So I felt like I made a difference. I want you to feel the same value in your careers. I have always felt I've made my small little difference in the world, and that is a huge thing. So then I decided I just didn't want to travel anymore. I got remarried, and I was like, this is really nice. I don't see my husband. Maybe that's the scene of a good marriage. But nonetheless, I wanted to see him more. So I said, thank you very much, resigned. And then I was like, well, what do I want to do? Well, what I decided is I went back to very square one. I started my career in commercial real estate. I actually created the first commercial mortgage-backed security that's traded, so blame 2008 on me. But I decided to go back and build buildings. But I used my brain and said, well, where do I want to build? I want to build where I feel like they create intellectual property, where people want to live, where there's a university community. Boom, took me to Raleigh. All right? And so I'm building there. But what am I doing that's different? Well, all of my office buildings have childcare facilities within them. Done. Check. Cost me money, I don't care. Done. Secondly, all of my multifamily have affordable housing in it. Done, check. I don't feel that my teacher, my policeman, should have to live outside the boundaries of Raleigh to actually teach my children in Raleigh, all right, and to keep me safe in Raleigh. So I'm doing that. And then the third thing, because I've realized, is that you still are going to buy some stuff, all right, and get it delivered, and everybody else is. We need a lot of warehouses because Raleigh's a great point that comes in where the boat comes in from either Europe or Africa and it goes west, or it comes north-south through there. And so that's the thing. So that's what I'm doing. So what have I done for my spare time? Well, I've gone on the board to advise the airport of how to do growth to accommodate all the growth that's coming in here. And then I've gone on the board helping support the teachers of our public schools, right? Because these people need support, all right? And it's not us to buy them supplies each year. It's to literally help them train so that their students can do better. Because we didn't feel the teachers were being supported, so we have a board there that does that, all right? So in a nutshell, I've had an amazing life. My daughter actually does talk to me. We were fortunate, though, because in Geneva, we have gypsies. So those years in 13 to 18 where she wasn't so likable, I could sell her and repo her back. It's a Wall Street thing, right? So I did that. But essentially, it's all good. And now, the final thing I'll end in is, it all sounds like, wow, she had this easy life and it was great and it all went good. I can't tell you the number of times I went home and sobbed and things didn't work and I was working for a boss that just didn't hear what I had to say and such. So I want you to really think about my biggest challenge in my career and my whole life has been that I had a mom who told me I should always have a voice. But unfortunately, you actually can't always have a voice. Sometimes you actually have to learn to listen. My mother didn't listen well. All right, I love her to death, God love her, and it was a good thing she didn't, all right, because she was a trailblazer in her generation. But I think that there is that point of understanding, and if I would say the biggest learning and challenge I have after 30 years is really been able to figure out how could I learn to listen better, to be more effective, so the first time I said my message, it really got heard. As opposed to maybe iterations where I finally got it right in the end, but I didn't get there in the first place. So understanding how to deliver. So I'll leave you with this final thing. How did I get my investors in my real estate fund to say that they'd be willing to take a slightly lower return, right? Because wait, I'm a capitalist and everybody wants to make the most money. It was very simple. I showed them that even with giving up a little bit, they still made ridiculously outsized money versus their other options, and then at the same time could help build and save and love the place that they love to live in. So I married the good, but married it with economics. So with that, I thank you for your attention, and I am happy to take any questions you might have. The only stupid question is the one not asked. Come on, somebody's got a question. Over. Who's got one? None.
Hi, my name is Michelle. Besides finding or looking for sponsors, were there any other resources or habits that you took up to help you propel into this standing point you are at now?
Great question. Yes. One of the things I do is I read voraciously. And I don't just read within my field. So what happens is a lot of people tend to just read the periodicals for their industry and maybe glance at the headlines. But I read everything. I read about, rocket science. I read about, plant life. I read about everything because it all actually interchanges. And the two things it did for me in my business career is, one, it gave me a better understanding of a lot of factors that might feed into a business decision, which might be not the traditional ones that I would be thinking about. But secondly, it also made me a better conversationalist when I went out to dinner with my clients or my potential clients, because you could be aware of their interests and hear and know a little bit enough to be dangerous, right? So you could actually have that conversation and be part of that, because people do business with people they like, right? And so that having that sense of can we find common ground on some level became a really important thing. So I read voraciously, and I also, the other thing I do now that we actually have it in this country, I listen to both sides of the news, all right? So and so I make certain I understand everybody's viewpoints so I can really appreciate both sides of an argument. And I think this is, again, that learning I was saying where I wasn't always listening as much in the early part of my career, here. I knew that I was right, but I think that was the big thing that I do. And the other thing that I've done that I think is very important is I've called fewer meetings of my team, so that when I'm hearing their ideas, they've really had a time to crystallize them, so there's just not meeting paralysis all the time. Anybody else? One over here? Got one? Oh wait, one back there, then up here.
Hi. A trend that we've been talking about in a lot of our classes is sustainability, and you didn't touch on that today, and I was wondering how that's come into play in your work.
You know, it's fascinating. It's actually so nascent. We talk about it all the time, but it's not really real. So I'll give you an example. If you want to look at the returns of social impact funds. There's long only, regular mutual funds, and there's hedge funds. And their returns have been so poor relative to everybody else that a lot of money initially went into it and then pulled out. And then people said, well, I'll buy tobacco companies and then I'll make the profits off of that and then invest in something else. Now, I think that we are now finally having a small, more permanent shift towards sustainability, but make no mistake about it, it costs double almost to do things. When I do my buildings and have to think about all those sustainability issues and things like that, the additional cost is huge, and not everybody's willing to give that up. Or you can't get the financing from a bank. You can't get, you have to understand that, and I'm not trying to sound like it's critical, right? But the bigger issue that we need to do, so if you think about it, right? What do we need to do in our town? We should never allow, and we need to talk to our friends in West Virginia, we should never allow a coal-fired plant in this country for electricity. We have many alternatives. But then you hear people on the sustainability side, but I don't want nuclear. But nuclear is actually the cleanest plant out there for actually generating electricity, right? So again, but everyone's like, I don't want nuclear, I don't want, so we have to do a better job, I think, on the sustainability side of educating ourselves on that cost-benefit analysis, but really also being open to all solutions that solve a problem, not just, the one that we think is the right way. Now, I will tell you, one of the greatest things in the Embassy Suites, which I just saw a second hotel chain do, is instead of the little bottles, all right, of shampoo and whatever, they've got, in the shower, the bigger bottles that they fill. That's tremendous. Like every hotel chain should be doing that. This is just stupid that we've thrown away this much plastic, right? So that's just dumb. The other thing is, start by, I refuse the straw all the time. I keep telling American Airlines I'm a concierge key. That means you fly like a stupid woman, right? And I keep telling them, would you do away with the straws in the Admirals Club? Everyone can drink out of a cup. We don't need sippy cups. We're good. And so, those types of things are things that we can do. So sustainability is very important, but we still don't hear enough of the economic argument that's going to finally sway the day. Where we finally got it was in China, because they have used coal-fired plants and people are dying so fast, and their one-child policy made them run out of people. So now they actually have switched faster into replacing coal because they realized we're going to have a population. And remember, you can't emigrate to China, right? So the interesting thing to understand, so it wasn't done, for any reason, it was an economic reason, but understanding that I think these are the things we're going to have to do to actually make sustainability work.
Hi. How would you suggest somebody go about finding a sponsor or even a mentor?
Sure. So I think the important thing is you have to think about, in your world, right, who you interact with, who do you admire, who do you think that they said something interesting, who shared something that made you learn something on a daily basis. Now, sometimes that mentor or sponsor might not be right there. It might be someone you read online, all right, or on Twitter or whatever, and you can DM them, all right, or you can link in with someone, right? You can do lots of things. But the reason someone sponsors is also because of what you do. So you have to truly articulate what you do, what your commitment is, what you feel about something, why you deserve sponsoring, right? Where do you want to go? The idea like, I just want to go into hospitality management, that isn't going to do it, right? I want to do this within hospitality management because I think I can deliver this over the course of my career. Those type of things are the ways that you start to connect with people. And it takes a while. Someone doesn't sponsor you immediately, but they start to think, And again, I'm not saying mentors aren't valuable, but what I'm saying is it doesn't get you to that next level up as easily, right? And that's what I'm trying to do, is ease this path of growth. We know, for example, women are 54% of college graduates, but we know after that they start falling behind. And it's not because we stop working and have kids. It's because we fall behind. And part of that is not having that sponsorship to be lifted up. And so the key is find the common ground, but then also ask. Have the courage to ask someone. And if that person feels they can't, then say, do you have someone else you recommend who might be willing to do this? Anybody else? Right here.
Thank you. I'd just like to say, first of all, you're a freaking badass. And like, you seem like you have the coolest life, but I know it comes with struggles along the way. But how do you find a focus on, if you have so many different things you want to do and life is long, how do you focus on one thing?
Well, I try to really think about where my skills are needed most at the right time. In other words, where and I am fortunate because I do have a voice, and so I can actually use that voice to bring others along with me. But what I do is I really realize the biggest issue is this income inequality, and we talk about it, and I'm not a bleeding heart liberal, trust me, all right? But the issue here is this is gonna come up and actually really backlash against us, all right? It's not gonna, and it could get quite, watch what's going on in Hong Kong. What's going on in Hong Kong is not that China was repatriating people, it's that there's 4 families that financially control that city that has become unlivable for the majority of people who've grown up in there in their whole lives because of cost. Right? That's the bigger bottom line issue that they felt wasn't being addressed. So this issue is one where I felt I could make a difference in my own little way. And by talking about this, and I can tell you my last 3 years at MasterCard, I literally talked about solving global poverty, and I literally went to 210 countries in the world and talked about this issue and got people thinking about it in a different way. And so I go where I see that the biggest need, but also where my skills can be applicable and help. And the other thing that I did is I also realized that, and you know, it's what Bill Gates and Warren Buffett realized, that together we were better than one. So I'm trying to get a lot of people not to be forming 8,000 different, nonprofits that are each, because the interesting thing, 80% of nonprofits in every city are created to solve a crisis as opposed to solving the long-term problem. So I figured, okay, my skill is in solving that long-term problem, so that's how I focus. Anybody else? Well, I just want, last thing I want to say is we are blessed to live in a country where you have opportunity, where you can be anything you want to be when you grow up. It has its flaws. Democracy is not clean, and it's never going to be, and the economy is not clean, and it's never going to be. But you each can make a positive contribution to it, and really start by being, as Ellen said this week, just being kind to everybody. It's a really important thing, and it really goes a heck of a long way. And so I thank you for your attention. I really appreciate the time.